She never wanted names on a building. We'll never put a name on a building because she never wanted it. She always felt that the best way to have someone speak good about you is to do good for that person. And we've heard stories around town this week from her friends on how she would give gifts to them just to give them gifts. Or they would call her when they were having a rough time. She never shared those stories. She was a very private person.
What's up, Sarasota? We're back with another episode of Sarasota SpeaX. As always, I'm Felipe Colon.
Trey Martell. And Brad had to go pitch T-ball with his little kid, so we're running the show.
There we go. We've got some great guests today, as we always do. Today we have Bill Villafranco and Kevin Pease with the Virginia B. Toulmin Foundation, and they're going to tell us about this wonderful woman who's been a prominent philanthropist in Sarasota for many years and who has a very unique story and is leaving a great legacy with the foundation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So just let's get right into it. Who is Virginia B. Toulmin and what is the foundation?
Virginia B. Toulmin was a pharmaceutical executive. She had a pharmaceutical company in Seymour, Indiana, that she took over in 1965 after her husband unexpectedly passed away. From 1965 to 95, she ran the company and sold it to a German conglomerate for $178 million. She immediately became incredibly wealthy. She was a Midwestern woman, and she lived in Dayton, Ohio, and spent part of the year here in Sarasota and fell in love with Sarasota. In the last 15 years of her life, this was her home. She established a foundation that gave quite a lot of money to the local arts organizations.
So she had a pharmaceutical company. What kind of drugs did she produce?
Primarily generic drugs that she private labeled for Lilly.
Okay.
So those are for people who don't know that market, those are the affordable ones that save us a few bucks when we go and we got the sniffles, right? Hey, everybody loves generics. You know,
so true.
Yep. Very cool. So, but you said something else during the pre-show that I found interesting. It wasn't just that she took over this company that her husband had when he passed away. She also took it from kind of a not so great place to a way better place before the sale. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Let me just go back to her relationship with her husband. First, she was a nurse by trade. She went to Wash U and worked in the in homes for at-risk moms having new babies. After a while, she felt that she needed a little bit more excitement in her life, so she applied for a job on the long-haul railroads, passenger railroads, and on the airlines. At the time, flight attendants were nurses. She ended up getting a job on the long-haul railroads. And that railroad that she worked on went from St. Louis through Dayton to Washington, D.C., where she met her husband, whose father and he were patent attorneys to the Wright brothers.
As in First in Flight Wright brothers.
The plane guys.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
And there, after only 7 years of marriage, Harry, her husband, was accumulating shares in this tiny pharmaceutical company in Seymour, Indiana, Central Pharmaceuticals, that was near bankruptcy. He put her on the board and said to her, one day, this company is going to make you very wealthy, but you speak the language, and when I'm no longer here, you'll be the chair. And unfortunately, only after 7 years of their marriage, he died. She became chair. She took over the company in bankruptcy, and as I mentioned, 20 some odd years later, sold it for an enormous amount of money.
What age was she when she took the company over?
Someone asked me that the other day.
She was in her early 60s.
When she took the company over?
She took the company over, I think. Or maybe
No, She was married at around 30. They were married for 7 years, so it was around 40.
Okay.
Yeah, she sold it when she was 65.
Very good.
Wow, so that's a long time. So it's not. I'm just getting the clarity on this because I don't want people to think, oh, this woman married a wealthy guy and got all this money and now we're celebrating her. I'm like, no, the story is not that simple. Not that there's anything wrong with that story either, but this is a way more complex and nuanced one.
She built it. And think about 1965, pharmaceuticals in the middle of the heartland of the United States against all the men. And here she was, little old Virginia from St. Louis, from a very modest family. And she took that company and she excelled. It's remarkable.
Wow, that's great. So we're going to get way more into the mission and what you guys are doing now, but I think this history is so, if you don't know where you've been, you don't really know where you're going, right? So how did she get to Sarasota? Let's unpack that part of the story.
Yeah, so she had a very good friend who lived in Dayton who would come to Sarasota. and one day asked her if she would join her for a couple of days in Sarasota. So they drove down 78, is it? I think it's 78 from Ohio into St. Louis.
75.
75.
Yeah.
And
Well, what year was that? Because 75 didn't exist until,
I'm not sure.
She drove down the highway.
She drove down the
There you
highway
go, that's right.
with Loretta, her best friend. And they settled here for a couple of days, and then it turned into a couple of weeks, and then she would come down and spend some time renting until finally she decided it was time to buy something here.
A story as old as time. They come down on vacation. They love it so much they move here.
Stay.
Isn't that right?
I'll tell you one other thing about Virginia. She had a lot of heartache in her life. Although after she lost her first husband, she was to be married to another gentleman years later. And a few weeks before they were to be married, he died of a coronary. And it was then that she said, I'm never going to marry again. I'm going to devote my life to others. And that's exactly what she did.
So no kids either.
No kids.
Okay, and that's probably an important part of the story as well, considering
Big part.
What we're talking about now, a large private foundation.
Right.
Okay, very cool. So for those looking to get involved in what you guys do, what does that look like? Let's fast forward a bit. She's in Sarasota. She's contributing to the arts and all her different causes. Talk about that transition from there to the idea of the foundation.
So I got to meet her in 1995 when she became Liquid, and I spent a lot of time with her. And I actually spent time in meetings with her. I watched her interview the executives. I understood her questioning. I understood what mattered to her. And from there, when she passed, she left her private foundation to just 3 people to manage with no direction. Because with Virginia, the most important aspect of a character is her trust. And she trusted the 3 people and left us, as I said, no direction. So we spent quite a long time, over 2 years, interviewing people that she was in business with, people that she gave to, family members, friends, to understand where her giving was. She was very private. And there were organizations which I didn't know she gave to because she kept it very private. And we uncovered that what she really cared the most about were performing arts. She cared about empowerment of women. It was a big thing for her. She had an affinity for kids, and she never had any. But she felt like that's where you needed to invest for those that had less. So she set up a number of different opportunities for women and young girls to succeed. And then, of course, medical research, because that's where her money came from. Another big part of the foundation in which she would be very proud of. She left a big legacy to Georgetown University Medical Center. Over $80 million, their second largest gift in Georgetown Medical Center history for medical research. So she's impacting lives today through this research.
Now, is a gift like that, is it lump sum or is it spread out over time?
Lump sum. Once she passed, Georgetown had control of that money by will.
Okay.
Let's talk some of those numbers just so people get a sense of the scale, because I feel like when you understand the numbers, it makes some of these rather esoteric discussions a lot more real.
People like to hear the big numbers.
They do. They love it. They just love it. So the $80 million gift to Georgetown, I mean, do you have is it disclosed what the foundation was worth at her death versus what it is today?
Sure.
And some of the other notable gifts that you've been given along the way. Then we'll get into your story and how she picked the 3 trustees, because I think that's fascinating.
Sure. So if you were to look up the 990s, the tax return of any foundation, you can see when she died in 2010, her foundation was funded with $140 million. She did leave a legacy gift to the Dayton Community Foundation for $26 million, and then the large gift to Georgetown for $80 million.
Wow. So that left you with, a considerable amount less to work with to start working on these other initiatives.
Correct.
And it seems like you've had to because she didn't leave you specific directives other than those 2 major gifts, you had to reverse engineer what her giving priorities would be and what the priorities of the foundation would be.
Right.
So who were the 3 people that she picked, and why did she pick those 3?
Interesting plan that she set up. She was a brilliant woman. I'm one of them named. Her trust and estate attorney was the second, and her banker was the third. And when she set it up, we each have lifetime appointments. There was one trustee that had one more power than the other, and that was to remove the other 2 trustees if he felt that they were not acting in good faith. Unfortunately, the lawyer who had that power had Parkinson's. And he didn't feel that he could fulfill the mission that Virginia asked. So he asked me to take that power. And I appointed his successor. And then the banker decided that he wanted to spend all of his time on the organization, the Dayton Community Foundation, where that gift was given, because he lives in Dayton. So then I named the third trustee. And it's a lifetime appointment for 3 people, and only 3 people. It could never be more than 3 people. And there's no limitations to how much we can give away in any one year. It was a clean sheet of paper.
That's incredible. Can you, as somebody who does this for a living, can you describe how unconventional that is?
Oh,
yeah, compared to give us a conventional version
Mm-hmm.
of what you usually see and why that's so unique.
Yeah. Most people have their own ideas where they want their philanthropy to go. Maybe a museum, maybe a college, whole host of organizations where they'll name those organizations. What makes this so unique is what she told me at her kitchen table a few weeks before she passed. And she said, I am going to leave you no direction because I trust the 3 of you will figure out what's best for this money. But more importantly, if the world changes, I want you to be able to go where those changes are and make a difference. Case in point, we have a nursing school in Bangkok, Thailand, because she would go to Thailand and help the young girls in the foster care system that when they were 18 or are 18, they're asked to leave the system. But a young girl in Thailand, they're not really useful in Thailand, as they call them, unless they're in the sex trade. So most of those girls leave the foster home and go into that trade. Virginia didn't want that, so she asked me to help her figure that out, and we set up a nursing school. So we have 500 girls now in Thailand that are nursing assistants, all because she had this idea of helping these girls have a better life. We're in our 20th year now. It's remarkable what we're doing there. So that's the way she thought. She always thought ahead of the curve, but the key component of Virginia is she had to trust you. And the first time you did something where that trust was exposed, you were done. She would not work with you in that same capacity again. She could still be friends with you, but in the trust capacity, there was no second chance.
Trust is a must. All right. So we understand that she is writing a book. Did she ever have that vision for the book? And you want to tell us about the book?
Sure. So I first met Bill in 2011 when I was working as a school administrator in the South Bronx in statistically one of the most economically depressed neighborhoods in the South Bronx. But we had this amazing little elementary school for the arts. So Bill came for a visit, and we became really quick friends after that. So over the past 15 years, we've gotten to know each other, and I've gotten to really understand his passion for Virginia. So much of the foundation's work is focused on children and young people. And as we've been talking about Virginia's legacy, it's been really important for us to figure out a way for those young people in these programs that are supported by the foundation to understand who she was and what she stood for. So about 9 months ago, we embarked on a journey to kind of create an imagined childhood of Virginia Toulmin and a set of stories to kind of serve as the origins of the unique qualities that made her a really special and unique adult. So we are starting in 1936 with the first story. Virginia's 10 years old. She's in St. Louis, and the first book is about the origin story of her love of the symphony and the orchestra, which she gave to very generously in her adult life, and which the foundation continues to give to.
What kind of principles are you trying to instill in children?
Fantastic question. So Virginia was a woman of faith. She was a woman of generosity. Family meant the world to her. Relationships meant the world to her. So each of the stories will have a different focus on one of those qualities. So passion for the arts is in this first book, but we have a story coming up somewhere in the series. We're still trying to determine where, that will focus on her Lutheran faith. She comes from a long line, generational line of Lutheran pastors in her family. So faith and service were key components of her life. And so talking about kind of as a child, how those things were instilled in her. And then also exploring some of her business savvy. There's a wonderful story that Virginia herself told about a childhood experience where she was explaining to her family that she had this really incredible math mind, and she had scored 100% on her tests at school, but the teacher said, well, we can't give you 100, we can give you a 99 because we just don't do that. So kind of pointing out like how she was really unique. She was a young girl that wasn't afraid to kind of rock the boat a little bit.
Very cool. Now, how long does it take to write a book? And then what plans do you guys have for distribution? Like, what are your goals for this book?
So the first book took about 9 months to write. We're expecting it to be published this May, so next month. The goal is for the second book to come out this November, around the time of International Girls' Day. And then the plan after that is to put out the additional stories on or around her birthday, which was the end of September. So September 27th of 2026 would have been her 100th birthday. So that's our goal for book 3. And then every year after that. So we're looking between now and like 2030, 2031.
Gotcha. And someone that knows nothing about the book world, and I'm sure the audience is in the same seat, how do you get a book these days? What's it like? Is it all digital, or do we want to strive to get that hard copy into a kindergarten class?
Yeah. So we're working with a fantastic independent publisher called VJ Publishing. They're based in the Miami area. And it's 2 phenomenal women, Valerie Allen and Dale Hoffman, who's actually based here in Sarasota, is actually a partner in that publishing company. So we'll have online digital distribution in addition to hard copies and bookstores. It'll be available on Amazon. The idea is to get this out in as many platforms as possible.
Very cool.
Now, you told kind of a little story when we were talking in the pre-show about why the focusing on the kids and why the book is such an important part of the overall strategy for getting the word out there about Virginia and the foundation and the good that it can do. Mm-hmm. You want to elaborate on that and let the viewers know?
Yeah, sure. Virginia's legacy is incredibly important to me. She was a woman of immense integrity. And I always think about, how do you keep someone's memory alive? You can do it with her contemporaries, of course, but her contemporaries are getting older, and the stories that they tell won't really tell the story of Virginia the way I think they need to be told. So who are the best? What is the best group to go to? It's to go to the kids that they can read the book, they can aspire to be that person, they can live her legacy. We have a number of scholarships that we give to school-age girls and boys around the country, and they're all named after Virginia. And to hold a Virginia B. Toulmin scholarship in vocal arts, for instance, at Juilliard in New York City, or a healthcare from a Sunrise Day Camp, or a Paul Newman hole-in-the-wall camp, counselor, Virginia B. Toulmin scholar. It means the world to these kids, and they're bringing Virginia's name forward for us. And we're hoping, and we believe it's going to happen with this book, there'll be opportunities for parents to sit with their kids and read this book and really enforce the importance of giving to others and to live a life that you would be proud of. That's going to create her legacy. She never wanted names on a building. We'll never put a name on a building because she never wanted it. She always felt that the best way to have someone speak good about you is to do good for that person. And we've heard stories around town this week from her friends on how she would give gifts to them just to give them gifts. Or they would call her when they were having a rough time. She never shared those stories. She was a very private person. I got to know her very well. I spent many, many, many years with her, and she just taught me lesson after lesson after lesson. And maybe you can hear in my voice or see my eyes, I am completely committed to this woman and her legacy. I said it before, and I'll always say this as long as I'm alive, she should be remembered as one of the greatest female philanthropists in American history. Not because of the work she did when she was alive, but the opportunity she gave others to do when she wasn't here. There aren't many people that do that.
Sarasota, we're having a great time getting to know more about the Virginia B. Toulmin Foundation, as well as Kevin Pease, author for the Virginia B. Toulmin miniseries book, and Bill Villafranco, who is one of the trustees of the foundation. If you want to get to know more about them and what they're doing, stay tuned for Rapid Fire, fueled by our friends at Food and Beer.
I'm Bill Villafranco
I'm Kevin Pease,
from the Virginia B. Toulmin Foundation.
and this is Rapid Fire.
10 random questions, 10 specific answers, nothing off limits. This is Rapid Fire, fueled by Food and Beer. What's your favorite TV show?
MASH.
I'm watching White Lotus right now.
What's your favorite breed of dog?
Labrador.
Golden Retriever.
What's your biggest fear?
Losing a child.
I'm gonna go simple, spiders.
If you weren't in your current occupation, what other line of work would you be in?
Childcare.
Welcome to Daddy Daycare. We're your team facilitators. My name is Charlie and this is Phil. Okay, anybody ever seen a mission statement before?
I think I'd be in the travel industry.
And how happy are they, Jimmy? Happier than Eddie Money running a travel agency.
Get happy. Get Geico.
Who's the greatest villain in either TV or film?
Darth Vader.
You don't know the power of the dark side.
The Joker.
Wait till they get a load of me.
Besides eating 4 Big Macs in a half hour, what Guinness Book of World Record do you think you could break?
Longest amount of time not sleeping.
For 6 months, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. With insomnia, nothing's real.
Longest time sleeping.
Better Batman, Michael Keaton, Christian Bale, or that one guy, Ben Affleck?
Ben Affleck.
And I think Christian Bale.
And if I leave you with anything, I'm going to leave you with these 2 words. I'm Batman.
In your opinion, which accent is the coolest?
Scottish.
All are deep. If he was a wee bit closer, I could lob a camera at him, kin.
English.
That you have a license to kill, not to break the traffic laws.
I wouldn't think of it.
What exactly a hot dog is? Does it qualify as a sandwich, or is it something else entirely?
Can we put an end to this debate about whether a hot dog is a sandwich?
Yes.
No. Absolutely not.
Agree to disagree. What's a skill you don't have, but wish you did?
Drawing.
Baking. I wish I was a better baker.
So, gentlemen, we've met with many nonprofits here in Sarasota. Sarasota is a very giving community, as you know. But when we talk about private foundations, I think sometimes the actual impact of these foundations get lost. I'll give you one example. My good friend Eric Arroyo, who's a trust attorney and handles these kinds of foundations like your old partner, he told me that the 911 system in the United States is entirely funded by a private foundation from money that was left a very, very long time ago and has accumulated. And you know, the other names, you know, that the household names are like the Fulbrights and the Rhodes. So can you talk about, you know, what it means to be a private foundation and what kinds of active roles you can take in the community and why people need to know the name of Virginia Toulmin?
So private foundations play a very important role. And why? Because they have a lot of latitude to be able to give to different causes. Many of the causes that we give to, primarily, in particular, the arts, are funded by the local government or the state government, and we know what's happening. The state government is cutting arts funding across the board, and they have been for years. So if private philanthropy does not come into the fold, we're going to be losing many, many amazing arts organizations here in Sarasota. And it's going to be harder and harder and harder to attract people to live in Sarasota because we're known as the arts capital of Florida.
Definitely.
Yes, everyone that comes on here talks about the arts and talks about Sarasota and the arts and then the beach. So I'd say it's second most attractive thing about Sarasota is
well, yeah,
right behind the
that's
beach.
what attracts people from like places like New York.
Well, regardless, the point is we got to keep the arts.
We have to.
If it's top two, we got to keep the arts to keep people coming to Sarasota.
But you're right. These private foundations are filling in the gaps, and we know that also because some of our guests that we've had from these arts organizations, when, we like to talk about the money here. We're all entrepreneurs, right? We want to know where the budget is coming from, and in many cases, a lot of that budget is from giving. Right, it's like when you watch PBS, they say viewers like you.
Right.
The foundations are the big viewers.
Yeah.
They're paying those bills.
We are. And we're an important segment as well to try to bridge the gap when that funding ceases. If you have the right relationship with the private foundation executives, you should have the courage to call them and ask them for more money. And that's what we do. We want people to call us, those in which we give money to tell us about either new programs they're launching, new ideas they have, or a funding shortage that they're having. And I don't say we fill it all the time, but we certainly look to try to help. After the last hurricane, we distributed a number of checks to local charities that got hit very hard by the hurricane. And it doesn't have to be a direct hit. It could be that some of the employees couldn't work because they lost their homes. And we felt the pain. And we didn't even hesitate. We wrote checks right away just to ease the organization's financial stress they were having.
Right, those indirect effects of these disasters, it's not always this thing you see on the news where someone's house got destroyed. It's now that person can't go to work and this business can't operate. And it's the reverse of the economic multiplier.
Right.
For a dumb blue-collar guy like me, explain it in very simple terms. How do you go about choosing which charities to sponsor and which, what's that process look like? Because charities by nature, they're willing to receive.
Right.
They got their hands out, right. Yeah.
So
try not to say that.
Well, I said it.
I will tell you that the principles that we follow were Virginia's principles, ones that she learned running Central Pharmaceuticals and the way she lived her life. And that was, we give to organizations that have terrific executive directors that we learn to trust, because trust was the single most important aspect in Virginia's becoming friends with Virginia. So we follow that principle. And what we do is we're by invitation only, meaning you have to be invited to fill out an application with us. But usually we'll get to know the executive directors and the organizations before they're asked to apply. But then once they apply and once they're granted funds, we are what you would call a very active philanthropist. And that means that you'll see me at camps. You'll see me go and spend time at the different organizations we support here. I'll be at the opera, I'll be at the orchestra, I'll be at the Oslo, I'll be at Girls Inc., playing with the girls. Because that's where the real work gets done, when you see the work that the organizations are doing for those that are being impacted by their work. So you can give a check, and that's, some philanthropists do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. You write a check and you wait for your report to come.
I'm sure a lot of organizations probably prefer that, right?
Which one?
Getting the check and going about your business.
I don't think so.
No? Well,
not
good.
the ones that we fund,
Good.
because
That's
they
great.
like the fact that we're there and we're experiencing what they write in those reports. It's very different when you're on the floor. Kevin was reading at Girls Inc. yesterday, and to see the girls so engaged in the story really made me think that we're on the right track. They were asking great questions at the end. That doesn't happen if you just send in a check. Also, a lot of private foundations rely on statistical measures. How many new people are you seeing? What's the impact of those? Well, if you have less people you're seeing and your impact is statistically less than what it was the year before, does that mean that you're not doing good work?
I get it. There's some things that don't come through on the metrics, right?
See them.
And you can't. And that speaks to your background a bit in education and arts, right? You're on the ground there.
Absolutely.
And this initiative with the book, it's an internal initiative. Have you guys, meaning it's not a grant that you're giving to him, it's you guys are doing this internally in the foundation.
Yes.
Have you done internal things before? Is that part of what you do?
Yeah, we do. We actually, on our website, www.toulminfoundation.org, you'll see at least 14 or 15 videos that we have. We have a video library of some of the work that we do and some of the work in Thailand as well. So you can actually see the impact we're making and meet some of the young kids in particular that have received funding, some of our scholarship winners. So we are trying to, and we are creating this video library so people get a feel for our work. And that's a project that we fund at the Toulmin Foundation. It's building her legacy.
Where did Virginia's connection to Thailand start?
So her attorney would go to Thailand often because he also had an affinity to try to help youngsters. It started in Santo Domingo, and then he branched off into Thailand, and she would go to Thailand with him, and he would take her to different orphanages that he visited.
Boots on the ground.
Yeah, no, that's really impressive. And you said you're serving 500 girls in nursing school there.
500 girls have graduated from our nursing school and are now employed in the hospital system. I go twice a year. And again, the impact that I'm making when I go, these are girls that really have had a very rough life. And all of a sudden, someone shows up who actually cares about them. And at first, they don't know why I'm even there. And now, after a week, I get to see them. And then I go back a year later and I see how they've progressed over that year. I can't even describe what it's like to see the progression and how excited they are.
What's the name of the nursing school?
It's the School of Humanity at Wat Arun Temple of Dawn.
Do they write it in English or in Thai?
Thai.
Okay.
And we have
I was hoping you were going to try to pronounce it in Thai.
No.
That would have been fun.
I can't say 3 words in Thai.
But you know, I think that's great because, again, with a lot of the people who aren't familiar, and I'm familiar with the private foundation world because my mom spent her whole career working for a corporate foundation, right? Or most of it. So I know a little bit about that stuff. But for people, for the layperson, I mean, like we mentioned earlier, you kind of just look at private foundations. You're like, oh, that's rich people stuff. That's, you know, they're getting a tax break. I'm like, you don't really feel that way if you're somebody who's been on the receiving end of some of the work that they're doing.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, which is fantastic. And that kind of tees up something we teased during the pre-show, you know, in terms of how, you know, Virginia, obviously she came to Sarasota. She loved it here. You know, she was able to exit that business and eventually start this foundation. How did Sarasota impact her giving the other way around? You know, rather than her just impacting us with bringing those resources down here.
She has some great friends that she developed through her years of giving because, again, she trusted them. So they became part of her circle. And, you know, Virginia had a brother, and that was it. She had a brother who died 1 year before she did. So in some ways, I would say she was lonely, and her family became those in which she learned to trust. But they all had families. So in some ways, she lived a sort of a lonely life, a fulfilling life for her, but yet somewhat lonely.
And so you became one of her. She was a mentor to you.
She was like my mom.
So how did that really come to play out? Like how did?
Yeah. So unfortunately,
I mean, you don't meet a lot of people whose, you know, especially young men whose mentors are older ladies who are pharmaceutical executives.
Yeah. You know,
I don't know anybody else. Do you?
You know, I think what happened on a pretty personal note for you to hear is that I had a son who died. And I was grieving deeply when I met Virginia, and it happened to be 15 years after he died. But I didn't deal with it. And all of a sudden, for some reason, I decided I was going to deal with it. And I went into a deep, deep depression. And she stood by me. I think the nursing in her, and she knew me as a person, and she knew that's not who I was. She helped me through that in a really, really difficult time. And I think that's what really brought us so close together. She called me every day to make sure I was okay. And she would spend as much time on the phone as I needed. And I would come and visit her, and we would just sit and talk in her apartment for hours. And I think she saw me as almost like a son in some ways. And she trusted me, and I trusted her. And I gave my darkest secret to her, and she helped me through it.
And you weren't even living in Sarasota then.
I was in New Jersey.
You were in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were that close that you were back and forth just to
I came
to
back
see her.
all the time to see her.
Now, how do you guys, how often are you in Sarasota now?
So I'm here about 5 or 6 times a year.
Okay. And you come in for the foundation purposes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. What are your thoughts on Sarasota in general?
There's a lot of construction. You know, she used to call the cranes, what would she call them? The skybirds.
The official bird of Sarasota.
She didn't like it. She didn't like it. And I got to tell you, I think it's nice, but it's sort of lost some of that small town appeal that, you know, I remember back in, you know, the days when she was here.
Yeah, I'm a little worried that we're going to start to look like Las Olas over in Fort Lauderdale on that north section of 41 over by the boulevard and all that.
We may,
it's
but
getting there.
Look, I mean, the world changes, and we have to adapt to it. And I think what they're doing here, we have to adapt to. And I think it'll be just fine. I think it's important for change.
How about you?
First time to Sarasota.
First time to
Sarasota.
Let's get your perspective as a first-time visitor.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? How many days have you been here so far?
I arrived Sunday afternoon.
When you're just
and I'm
going around reading books to kids, and what else are you doing?
I've been listening to these interviews of people at New Virginia, spending time with Bill, doing a lot of listening and learning. Virginia hadn't talked about herself much, so I'm on this perpetual kind of treasure hunt to uncover things that might be helpful in the next books.
Understood.
But Sarasota's, what I've said to a number of people that I've met this visit is that you have no right to have the arts and culture scene that you do here. For a town of your size, it's really incredible.
That's what we hear.
Yeah.
Coming from someone who was in New York, I mean, that's a big deal.
New York, and I've run arts organizations around the country. It's an embarrassment of riches that you have here with the Oslo and the Symphony and the ballet and the opera company.
You have any good meals?
I've had a couple of really, really good meals.
Really good meals.
Michael's. We're at Michael's.
We're at Michael's.
Michael's on East, a classic.
The place.
We had Michael Clapper on the podcast. Great guest, great guy.
Go on
great
about
restaurant.
the food. Go on about
the food. We were at Arts and Central last night for a great meal out on the patio.
We had him on the podcast as well.
Huh?
Fantastic.
It was a great night with good friends and really good food.
Now, I bring this up because my wife's side of the family, they're from the Chicago area, which you're from.
Yep.
And my wife spent time in New York, all right? And they're transients down to Sarasota.
Transplants.
Not
transients, transplants.
Whatever they do, they move down here.
Transients would assume they're leaving, and I don't know if that would work for you.
See you later. But anyways, they always go back to, Sarasota's great. It's so much better than Chicago or New York, but the food isn't as good. And my theory on this is that it's just they got to hold on to something from the past.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
I think the food here I think it's great.
Food is great.
It's really great.
Shout out my wife, Morgan and Brianne.
Yeah.
So we got New York and Chicago both agree the food is fantastic.
Cool.
So, we also, obviously this is this hyper-local podcast about Sarasota. Thanks for being here and telling us all about Virginia and what you guys are doing. We look forward to seeing, more of the progress. And
Tom Law and Trey Martel want to know, what are your thoughts on roundabouts? This question's for you, not you.
All right.
Do you hate them? Do you love them? Do you want them in Sarasota or do you want to get them up?
I hate them.
Why do you hate them? Tell us.
I can't even drive in them. I can only imagine those that are much older than me can maneuver around these. It's tricky. It's really tricky. So no, I don't like them.
Now, what do you say to those with the scientific facts or the metrics, as you said earlier, that they save lives and they help traffic flow quicker?
Okay. I don't like them. You asked me if I liked them. I do not like them. I think they are really a difficult thing to do, to maneuver around these. And I can tell you, I've kind of cut across people sometimes too.
Have you witnessed any accidents in the roundabouts?
I have not.
A lot of horns though. You always hear the horns.
The way you feel about roundabouts is the way I feel about driving in the entire state of New Jersey. So maybe, and I know that's where you're living,
that's
right?
Where I live.
There you go. So maybe there's something to that because I can't stand driving over there. Doesn't make sense to me. So, but when we ask about roundabouts, what we're really asking about for most people who live here or spend a lot of time here like you do, how are your thoughts about how Sarasota's changed and developed?
I actually like it. I think there's a...
minus the roundabouts.
Minus the roundabouts. I mean, there's a lot more younger families here. It's much more vibrant than it was. You can actually go out at 10 o'clock and find someone to have a beer with. I love them. I think it's great. And I think what they're bringing here, especially downtown, is really great. Ocean Prime, right? Ocean Prime just opened.
Yep, new restaurant.
Which I think is phenomenal. So the restaurants that are opening are higher quality than they were before. I love it. I think it's great.
And I think some of the construction's following suit. I mean, we're maxed out on Ritz-Carlton Towers, but they're coming in with some other concepts that are even higher end supposedly. So
thank goodness.
We will well, that's something for everybody, right?
Exactly.
So we'll see. We're building some workforce housing too. So
Important.
on the other end of the scale, right?
That's very important, especially in the sectors we work at Toulmin. When we deal with some of these organizations like Children's First and Girls Inc., where the people who work there are vital to the success of the programs, the housing market is driving prices through the roof, which means the salaries need to go up, which means they're looking for more money. It just becomes a very difficult spiral.
Growth means growth.
Growth means growth.
Clip that one too, Trey. But
I'll put it on a T-shirt for you.
Put it on a T-shirt. Since we're on the topic of that, you want to shout out some more organizations that you've partnered with here, and maybe why you've partnered with them in particular?
Yeah. So the opera, a big one for us. Oslo Theater, another big one for us. The Symphony, for sure, another one of Virginia's loves. Children's First, Girls Inc., Boys and Girls Club.
Trey, that's a favorite of Trey's. He was, what did they call you when you attended? A club member, or I don't know.
One of the best success stories ever to come out of the Boys and Girls Club.
I mean, those are the 80% of those that we give to.
Very cool. Very cool. Love that. So what's the dream? We talked a little bit about this during the pre-show. Yeah. I didn't want to spoil it during the pre-show, but what would be like the dream result for some of the work that you both are doing, especially with the book and getting Virginia's name into the hearts and minds of future generations of people that are going to be hopefully benefits of, the work you're doing? Mm-hmm. And just generally, like what would be the ideal, 10 years down the road?
It would probably be that.
Because I'll give you a second to think, and
because it's a big question.
Yeah, it's a big question. But when I think of the most prominent private foundations that have made a difference in not only this country but the world, you think of certain household names, right? You think of your, the Rhodes Scholarship. You think of the Fulbright Scholarship. Maybe you think of the Kauffman Foundation for small business. I mean, these are the foundations that are, been doing things that they've transcended beyond the lexicon of just people who care about that world, the philanthropic world, and they've kind of gone into common parlance. Right. So I would love to see a woman's name in particular be part of that sort of list, and especially a woman like her from our little town here on the beach.
I couldn't say it any better than you just did. That would be an incredible accomplishment and something that would make me incredibly proud. So yeah, that would be a Virginia B. Toulmin name everywhere, one that people just rolls off their tongue, and the impact that we've made on these. I mean, the kids to me are just the most important part of what we're doing. The next generation of people and youngsters that need to carry the legacy of her life on. It's just critical.
And, like Virginia, I think you guys have in the past not really told some of the stories. I mean, you've been doing a lot of giving, but, we don't necessarily hear about that. And like I say about a lot of things, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, right? Tell us about the story you told me about the chef's program, and that kind of ties into why you're focusing on the book as well.
Yeah. We just teamed up with Young Chef Academy and Girls Inc. To offer girls 8, 9, and 10 an opportunity to learn culinary skills. And it all came to play. Monday was National Coffee Cake Day. And it turns out that Virginia loved coffee cake. Virginia's grandfather died suddenly when she was just a child, and grandmother moved into her house and made coffee cake, which is where Virginia learned to love coffee cake. And once Kevin uncovered Monday being National Coffee Cake Day with Dale Hoffman, we put our heads together and said, hey, let's do this in honor of Virginia. And then Dale reached out to Young Chef Academy, and they were incredibly happy to do something like this. But the trick was they're not a nonprofit. And as a private foundation, we give only to 501c3s or other charities. So I went to Angie Stringer at Girls Inc. and said, hey, we do a lot together. What about this program where we can start even younger? Now we're offering scholarships to girls going to college, but how about we start even younger? And I have an idea. And she said, I love it. Let's do it. So we were over there on Monday, and these 10 girls, they baked coffee cake and muffins. Yeah. And it was interesting because the parents were in the back watching, and I think somewhat skeptical in a way. Like, what is this? Why are we doing this? And by the end, when the girls got their little chef coats and they walked out, their parents were beaming. And probably the greatest part of that afternoon was the girls were asking questions about who was this lady Virginia Toulmin, and why am I getting this, and what does it mean for me? And we had an opportunity to answer those questions to the 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, which is exactly what we're trying to accomplish. It was an incredible day, and the coffee cake was incredible.
What was the recipe like? It wasn't Virginia's recipe or anything.
It was not. It was not
that would
a recipe.
That would have been the next level, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, we couldn't uncover that.
Yeah, you guys have a lot of research to do on your hands.
A lot.
But one of the things I love about Virginia's story and about what you guys are doing is also, I think we kind of forget, historically, people who've amassed great wealth in this country have had a call to civic duty that they've rised up and met. And I think we see that when we look at all the great philanthropists and philanthropies that have gone on. I sometimes worry that is becoming lost on the next generation. They're growing up in a world where, they're seeing people that are rich on the internet acting like fools, spending a bunch of money.
No damn class.
Well, I wasn't going to say that, but, you can read between the lines. I mean, that is an issue.
Yeah.
So, I mean, has that been part of your calculus in terms of reaching out to try to focus on the younger generation? Because I just think that's something that I don't know if we've lost it, because plenty of people could be doing a lot of giving and acting like idiots on the internet. I'm not sure, but I know they're definitely acting like idiots on the internet.
Yeah.
And that's what the kids see. That's what they're looking at.
The accumulation of personal wealth seems to be taking center stage more so than not only the responsibility, but the opportunity to learn how to be generous, to learn how to improve your community. My 9-to-5 job is with the Jewish Community Centers of Chicago, and I oversee a program called Growing Hope there. And one of the tenets that we live by is a Jewish value, tikkun olam, which means repairing the world. And so much of Toulmin's work is helping to instill in young people the idea that this is their planet, these are their communities, and they have the responsibility, but also the power to improve those communities and make better. So if these books and the work we're doing with Virginia's Legacy can inspire one kid to want to engage in philanthropy of their own, even at a small scale, I think that's a win.
I want to put it on the other side too. The executive directors of these organizations, we put a lot of pressure on them to work with us. Meaning, with Jennifer Romanicki over at Selby, we started the Virginia B. Toulmin Female Leadership Scholarship Award, where Jennifer is working with one girl right now so far who's a junior in college. And they have an opportunity to spend time with Jennifer as Jennifer mentors them for a year. And they get to go to the Selby board meetings. They get to be a member of Selby. So we are emphasizing the executive directors. They have so much pressure on them, but it's really critical that you work with us in developing programs that you can actually mentor these young kids. I mean, Angie Stringer at Girls Inc. is probably one of the finest executive directors in the services area I've ever met. She's like a mother to all these girls, and she's helping them see the things that are important. Really important to us. It's a real partnership.
That's great to hear, because we talk a lot about developing our future leaders, and especially when it comes to young women, them learning STEM and engineering and all that stuff. But sometimes when we focus so much on the skills, we forget about the values.
Yeah.
And I think they're getting bombarded by all these other values constantly. So it's something we got to keep in mind.
One more thing I want, if you don't mind. So
please.
There's an organization in New York called MyFace, and it deals with kids with craniofacial differences. And there's a young man who came to me, and we give money to MyFace, the Toulmin Foundation. And he came to me as something called Mobius syndrome, where his face is paralyzed since birth. He can't close his eyes to sleep. And he's probably in his early 20s now. He's had over 15 surgeries just to be able to smile. But he's worked so hard that he's now a pop artist. And he came to me and said, Bill, I want to create a music video. And I want to bring so many people with disabilities together, and I want to create the old MTV style music video. Can you help me? And I said, absolutely. So we had someone produce this music video last Sunday in New York. There were over 150 kids there with different disabilities. And I was happy for Austin, who was the singer, but the stories he told me about those kids that never would have had an opportunity to either meet each other or participate in something this substantial. And the name of the song that Austin wrote is called Disability. So now there's going to be this platform of this video to be able to disseminate through the Toulmin Foundation across the country on giving kids an opportunity to not be afraid by their disability, but to come out and be with the others. So we look for those, which means that we have to look for the generations below us to guide us to what they're going through so that we can look for the proper funding to help them. And we are all about that. We want to listen to what they're telling us and work with the different chapters or different organizations on how to create it. And then we like to be part of it.
That's great, because I feel like with especially the younger generations, they're so used to being told. You know, they grew up with helicopter parents. You know, if they had parents, I mean, you know, that's a privilege too. And they're so used to being told. So now what your organization is doing is taking some cues and asking them to tell you.
Exactly.
Because that kind of follows up. And I was going to ask you, how did you find Austin? How did you find him? And you know, because you said you guys are application only, or what was the term you used?
Yeah. By invitation.
By invitation only, funders. So,
Yeah.
like, how do you find them? That sounds like a lot of work.
It's just being an active philanthropist. It's actually going to the MyFace events, getting to meet the kids. I met them on one of their walks. We give them money, and I felt my responsibility was to go and see, where is this money going? And I went on a walk and I met him, and I couldn't believe this young man and the story he told me. And then we just, interestingly, you know, that population and those kids, I call them kids, but the young adults, like, they have a hard time trusting us because of exactly what you said, because we always told them what to do. Or their doctors were their best friends through all their surgeries. And now they're young adults and they want to trust someone, but they're not sure why they should trust, in this case, me, right? Why would you trust me? You're just coming to a walk. Why do you want to get to know me? What's in it for you? And once you break that down and they trust you, they start really offering great ideas on how we can make a difference. And I mean, that's how it works. We just have to be in it.
And we can't, it's not as easy for us to put ourselves in their shoes. So we need those ideas. Otherwise we're not spending the money and you know, the efforts where they're best utilized.
I go to South America quite often with another trustee, and we go to some really remote areas of South America where women's health care is non-existent. And we want to know what we can do. So we funded mobile health units.
Well, from what I'm told, there's some areas of this country where women's health care is non-existent.
This country as well. This country as well. But we're international.
Tough thing to think about. Yeah.
So we want to make sure we're at least hitting some areas around the world. The stories are just horrible. So we have mobile health units that we funded that bring the services to these women because they can't get to the services. So again, we're trying to meet the people on what they need, and if it meets our criteria within the foundation.
Very cool. Trey, did you have any final thoughts?
Nope, it's been wonderful.
Yeah, thanks. We're going to have you guys back maybe when the book comes out, or maybe we're going to maybe do some panels where your input would be valuable. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Well, we always ask a final question.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We always ask a final question.
Okay.
You've been on Sarasota SpeaX. You see what we do here. Appreciate you very much. Who do you know who we may not know who Sarasota needs to know? Who can you recommend we invite on Sarasota SpeaX?
I need to know who the 95 people before me were.
Spit some out.
We get duplicates all the time. If you give us a duplicate, we just keep pressing you until we get one.
I have a name.
Go.
All right, let's go.
So in the interviews this week, in talking to Virginia's friends and confidants, a fabulous woman, Flora Major, who has, I think, this incredible story. She was born in Hungary and moved to New York City, made her fortune with her husband in telephones, and is now very involved with the Hermitage Center here.
Yeah, the Hermitage, right. Yeah. Very cool. That's someone we
He's been here 2 days. He asked one. What do you got?
Right.
He took mine. We talked about her on the way in here.
Did you tell him you were going to use that one?
I didn't know the question.
Oh, okay. Well, we ask this question every episode. So.
All right, let me think. Who would I want you to interview here? Veronica Brady.
Oh, I know Veronica.
Has she been on the show?
No, she is not. But tell them why.
So Veronica Brady, when I first showed up in town, took me under her wings and brought me to a number of local charities. Ones, she knew Virginia, but not very well, but she knew the kind of person she was. So she introduced me to so many different organizations, and I have utmost respect for her. And whenever a new foundation is brought to my attention, that's who I go to first. Veronica, do you know them? And why? And should I do this or shouldn't I? And I spent a lot of time with Keith, her husband as well. Keith Monda and Veronica, I always see when I come here to always talk about the lay of the land in Sarasota in the charitable giving world.
It's definitely good to have someone like that. When I worked in politics, that there was usually one person we relied on for that too. What is her, I know she does a lot of things, but what is her title, if she has one right now?
She no longer is.
Oh, she doesn't.
She doesn't work, but she's working with Keith Monda in giving their money to a host of charities here, and they are philanthropic leaders here.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, guys, thanks so much in helping us get to know more about what you do and more about Virginia, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.